Teachers, childcare workers of Reddit. What is worst case of helicopter parenting? My child can do no wrong you've ever seen? I once took a babysitting job when I was 17 to earn some extra cash. The 9-year-old child wanted to play soccer inside. I told him many times not to do it and even took the ball away. He had another one and kicked the ball all around the house, completely ignoring me. He broke a lamp, some picture frames after knocking down a shelf, and a window. When the parents came home they blamed me for the damages and thought I was screwing around in the house. Why? Because the kid said I was doing that. Never took another babysitting job after that. I had posted this some time ago on our Child Free. When I was 21, I was still living with my parents. Our neighbors were just the worst kind of parents. They let their kids bully other children and harass people's pets. One time the kids were bullying the puppies of a stray dog that lived in our neighborhood, pulling their tails, twisting their ears, etc. Predictably and understandably, the mama dog growled and snapped at them. Some of the other neighbors tries to tell them that they shouldn't abuse animals. The kid's mom began yelling that a dangerous animal almost killed her babies. One day they came to our place for dinner. I couldn't stand this family, so I decided to eat in my room. Then suddenly I heard our puppy let out a painful yelp. Turns out the girl had kicked him. I ran downstairs immediately and picked him up while staring daggers at the kids. Their parents just smiled and said, "Oh, the kids were just playing with your pup." I lost my temper and yelled at them to get the frick out. They left grumbling about how rude I was being. However, in just a few days, the mom asked my stepmom, who is a teacher, to tutor her kids. Free of cost, of course. You know those kids are going to be serial killers someday. I didn't answer a phone call from my parents in college and they called security at 7 AM on a Saturday to knock on my dorm room to wake me up and call them. Talked to all my high school teachers prior to the first day of school to get extra books so I didn't have to carry anything home. Wrote a handwritten letter to me asking me not to go to my BF house during the week because the road was too dangerous. I was 23. Wrote my high school papers for me. Yeesh. Family with severe boundary issues. I quit teaching high functioning special education when I taught my middle school kids how to dial 911 and work with an operator for assistance and got criticism from 5/6 parents for traumatizing their children. The irony? One of the parents had choked about a year before and needed assistance, but my student was terrified, didn't know what to do and ran away. The woman had passed out on the lawn and a neighbor responded. They had to send the police to help search for the student who had frightened her that much. I emailed a parent to say their child was currently passing, but could technically fail the class if they did poorly on their final project and final exam. In the ensuing parent-teacher conference, I was told I was trying to fail the student and ruin his football scholarship. I had a parent swear I was targeting son and that he was failing my class because I was refusing to allow him his modifications. He was severely dysgraphic. That's a very serious accusation and can result in sanctions against your teaching license and federal lawsuits. To prove that I was following his plan and that he simply wasn't doing his work, I started sending him to the special education lab, which allows kids with modifications and accommodations to have a quiet place to work and a smaller teacher to student ratio. He immediately decides to cheat on his work so his grades will go up and it will look like I was the problem, but the teachers in the lab caught it and documented it for me. The mom insisted that he just felt pressured to perform, which he may have, but it wasn't coming from me. The moment I clashed the rest of the year. The next year one of my students who had been in the class brought me a newspaper article where the kid had been arrested for drug possession and told me he was in rehab. Overall the kid was a terribly behaved turd, but I still felt bad for him because he had to go home to his mom. For those of you who, like me, didn't know what dysgraphic meant, dysgraphia is a transcription disability, meaning that it is a writing disorder associated with impaired handwriting, orthographic coding, orthography, the storing process of written words and processing the letters in those words, and finger sequencing, the movement of muscles required to write. Had a father tell the principal that his son could call 3 Jewish brothers anti-Semitic slurs because they were of the devil and his son followed the true word of God. He claimed the school would be violating the son's, rights with any disciplinary actions. There were no disciplinary actions taken. 1980s. But Jesus was a Jew. I work daily with kids in outdoor programs. I screamed at a kid who was about to run into the road while a car was coming. The only time I ever scream like that is when a child's life is in danger. The child proceeded to have a meltdown because, as I later found out, he never gets disciplined and his parents never hold boundaries with him. His mother was there and comforted him. She wasn't mad at me, but she was saying Forest Ninja is sorry she yelled at you, and I was like, no, I'm not. I stopped him from getting hit by a car. I've gotten to know this child over 2 years and he is so disruptive and is never held accountable. It's pretty scary. Because I work in nature education, I meet a lot of parents experimenting with alternative parenting, and most methods do more harm than good. Be in charge. You're the adult. Preschool teacher here. A 4-year-old would bully, tease, punch, pull other kids' hair and curse up a storm. He was so challenging to the point where a lot of focus was on him, and the other kids were following his lead, and he took advantage of that hard. Nothing we said helped him change for the 2 years we had him. We gave him so many consequences, and while we did reward good behavior, he rarely ever was good. Parents would completely baby him. They acted like he was innocent and his behavior was cute to them. They never took what we said seriously and think we exaggerate. He's going to kindergarten now, so good riddance. Had a child who was inappropriately touching himself during my after-school program on a regular basis. Kept reminding him to do it privately in the bathroom because I know it's age appropriate in kindergarten. Keeps doing it. Have a convo with mom and she says it's okay, he is just expressing himself sexually at 5 years old and we should embrace that. He touches himself and plays with himself all the time and the other children could learn from it. I'm sorry, what? A child should not have one hand on their snack and the other hand down their pants while in the lunchroom with 19 other kindergarten students. Have a convo with mom and she says it's okay, he is just expressing himself sexually at 5 years old and we should embrace that. He touches himself and plays with himself all the time and the other children could learn from it. RED. I taught middle school social studies and we would watch Channel 1 News daily and write an hour writing journals about what we saw and heard that stood out or was interesting. Then we would have brief 5-10 minutes discussions after and allow kids to read or respond. This was in 2013 to 2015 when there were a lot of stories about gay marriage at the Supreme Court, transgender bathroom laws, Syria, protests, etc. Well, I was mentioned several times on the school's unofficial Facebook page that I had a gay agenda and that I was trying to teach students about the gay lifestyle. 2 parents banded together and got other parents whose kids were not even in my class to confront the school board. They did official investigation and I was told to stay home for a few days. It all amounted to nothing after they interviewed the kids and clarified the situation and even read some of the journals. I basically got 2 days off with pay, but I did not like the scrutiny in a SS class where teaching current events is important. I'm not sure if this counts as helicopter parenting, but I was working with 3 5-year-olds in an ESL program and there was one 3-year-old that I could see the monster inside growing. I asked to speak to his mom. First time I've ever had to do that for a 3-year-old, and laid out what I saw happening in her son. I explained to her what would happen if she didn't start setting boundaries for him at home and giving him more structure. She basically told me to frick off because she had read some books. I had nearly a decade of young child learned experience at that point and an advanced degree, but it didn't matter when compared to her books. Fast forward to 2 years and many incidents meetings later and mom was back in a beating 8 months pregnant and bawling her eyes out because she was terrified of her son and how he'd react to a new baby at home. This is a kid who drew blood stabbing his best friend with a pencil because his friend reminded him of a rule. Not just that, the little monster had to get up from his table and walk a ways to get to the other kid to stab him. He finally got pulled from the program and I can only hope that mom finally pulled her head out of her butt long enough to get him the help he so desperately needs. I guess this is more helicopter aunting, but I think it still applies. I'm a college professor, so 99.9% of the time I never hear from my students' parents, and, legally, thanks to FERPA laws, couldn't talk to them about their students even if I wanted to. Last year, during the final week of one of the summer bridge programs for incoming freshmen I teach in, I got an email from one of my students' aunt. She wrote me a 5-page long email. I copied it into Word because I was curious, detailing, line by line and comment by comment, why she disagreed with what I'd written on her niece's essay and the rationale I'd used to give it an F. Every single one of my comments on a 5-page essay had a short paragraph devoted to picking apart the comment and rebutting it. At the end, she lambasted my teaching and suggested I'd failed the student out of spite. Totally untrue. The girl could barely string together a coherent sentence, let alone a grammatically correct one. When I told her I wasn't allowed to talk to her about her students' grades due to federal law, she called the program director and demanded I be fired. The fun twist at the end of the story, though, is that we ultimately figured out why she was so angry with my comments. Turns out she'd been writing her niece's essays all summer and had taken my comments personally. Needless to say, the niece was removed from the program. Butthole kid beat up a much smaller kid for no reason other than they felt like it. Parents get called in, the father goes completely apeshit and physically attacks the principal for lying about his perfect child. He ended up getting arrested and the school barred him from setting foot on the grounds. Oh man, I can finally say something on Reddit to contribute. I just finished my first year teaching in elementary education. We had a 4th grader who had an IEP, indicates special accommodations typically given to students with mental disability, and I personally saw Asperger's syndrome in him and related a lot because my brother has the same mentality, impulsivity and diagnosis. Well, this boy craved attention more than any teenage drama queen and did anything to get a rise out of students. Every class I had him, all 26 students would be distracted by what he is doing about every 2 minutes. I would walk him outside after an outburst, cause I knew yelling at him would cause overstimulation, and discuss what behavior he just exhibited and why it was wrong to do these things while we are learning together. He made it clear he understood and genuinely felt bad. We'd walk back in and 10 seconds later he's back at it. After the first day of talking to him outside of the class, his mom takes up arms, calling my principal and telling her that I am singling him out. We had a staff-wide meeting about how this specific parent was requiring the following procedures for handling her kid. No negative adjectives could be said to him about his behavior, we could not clip down PBIS used by the whole county. We couldn't speak with him alone in the hall or take him out of the class because we're singling. So I interviewed at a high school yesterday and got the job. Frick his mom for not addressing her child's mental health. My mom tried so hard to help my brother and they've nurtured him for 35 years and he still has major issues in life. I hope this child's mom gets a frickin' epiphany and get him the help he deserves. What the frick is parenting? I once worked as an au pair for a family and a few days in the mum had to go to work early and so I was fixing the kids' breakfast. I asked the daughter what they normally had and she said cereal, so I fixed it. The younger boy then comes down and throws the bowl on the ground and starts demanding ice cream. Now I assumed this was just a tantrum and didn't give him any and instead managed to convince him into toast covered in Nutella, which seemed a bit better. When his mum got home I told her what had happened and she was shocked that I hadn't immediately caved and said in future I should give him whatever he asks for. The rest of the time I stayed with this family I never once saw this kid eat any fruit vegetables, had ice cream for breakfast and sometimes dinner if he was really playing up. The fact his parents never considered this maybe should change still shocks me. I work as a camp counselor for church camps. One girl I had in my cabin was an absolute brat. She would sass me, call girls in the cabin idiots and tell them she was better than them because she was in gifted classes, and she would punch some of the boy campers. She collared my friend who was a boys counselor and ended up causing him to fall and bust his lip. But when she was confronted about it, she just shrugged and said he's the one who fell, it's his fault. The final straw was when she got mad because I told her she couldn't go to the playground. We were literally eating lunch, like, sit down and eat. So she huffed and shoved my little sister into a chair screaming, "Get out of my way, brat." My sister only cries when she's mad. I looked over to her, completely shocked, and as soon as I saw tears welling up in her eyes I knew it was go time. I grabbed her, took her to my friend, and as he tried to calm her down, I ran after this brat. I told her she had to apologize and she straight up went, "My mom says I never have to apologize because people should be paying attention to me. When I get mad I blow up," etc. Honestly I didn't hear her. I was seeing red because who the heck did this 10 years old think she was hurting my sister? I ended up letting her get back to the cabin. She's crying and screaming at my older girls in the cabin now, and I got the camp director. He yelled at her, made her apologize, and told me to call her mom. Called the mom, and this lady seriously went she didn't seem to do anything wrong. Maybe that little girl should grow some thicker skin. Excuse me? My sister is super thick skinned. Your brat just pee her off. Because who wants to be pushed into a metal chair like that? Well, sorry, that's so long LMAO. I've never been so mad at a kid before in my life. I hope this brat doesn't end up in my cabin again. Not a teacher, but I used to nanny for a pretty affluent lady down the street during the summer holidays in high school. Took legitimate childcare classes before starting, multiple younger siblings of my own, leader of a local youth group, etc. I felt prepared, was getting the kid up and running in the morning, pick up after preschool, preparing lunch, dinner, crafts, planning activities up until bedtime and putting the kid to sleep. The little girl was about 3. I had my own key to the house and on most days I didn't see the mom until about 20 minutes after her child went to sleep. Kid was a brat. Temper tantrums over every single instance that didn't go exactly her way. Screeching hissy fits and tears all day long. Kid would purposely drop cereal on the ground and refuse to pick it up, because that is what the housekeeper is for. Personal cell phone. At 3. As a direct line so her dad could call her whenever he felt like it. Randomly telling cashiers at the store that they were poor. Endless demands for gifts and candy. Never really had food that wasn't takeout before we started cooking together. No discipline whatsoever. The kicker here. Whenever the tears didn't immediately work, little girl would snottily announce, "If you don't do what I say, then I will feel ill," and then would make herself throw up on purpose through sheer power of will, and demand that you caught the puke with your hands. Her mom did exactly that. I didn't. Made it through 3 years of that before I went off to university, simply because the mom paid so incredibly well and because no one else was willing to go babysit there. In the end the kid liked me a lot. Mostly because I didn't put up with her crap and because I took her out for activities, outdoors walks with my dog when she actually behaved. Last I heard, the kid's grandma moved in with them so she could accompany their little Veruca Saul to school every day. Her mom still thinks that her kid is special and smart for being demanding. Not a teacher or child caretaker, but I remember when I was in 8th grade this little kid, about 3rd or 4th grade, was really weird and hung around us while we skateboarded. One day he decided to come up after I fell and just hump me. I was obviously mad and told him to go away and he didn't. Well, I fell another time and he humped me again. I was livid. I told him if he doesn't go away I'll tell his parents. Then he just walked up to me while I was sitting on the bench and humped me again. I told him I'm going to tell your parents, and he bolts inside his house closing everything. All the guys and I were fed up too, so I decided to go to walk to his house and knock on his door. No one answered for about a minute, then both his mom and dad was a cop, come out. I told them what he did. Well, his mom completely ignores what I say and then explains, well, he said you punched him multiple times. Mind you, I did not punch this kid, but I did push him off twice when I fell and pushed him away from me when I was on the bench. Not one of the times did he fall or stumble, I just gave a simple push. She continues to berate me, saying I'm a child beater, and then the dad chimes in and says he should arrest me. Well, of course I start crying because I'm scared. I again reiterated that I never hit him, I simply pushed him because of his unacceptable behavior. Then they tell me how he has ADHD and was just acting out. I say, well, I was diagnosed with ADD a couple years ago and it's never made me doing anything like what he did. Then the dad screams, if you don't get off my lawn I'm going to arrest you, and starts walking towards his cop car. All of us run away as fast as we can and I run home. Well, after a while my dad gets home and I tell him all of this. So he calls his buddy who's the guy's superior and tells him what happens. Apparently the dad was going to get a promotion but they just kept him as is. He got suspended from the police force for a couple weeks and got kicked off the neighborhood board members committee. They suspended him on unlawful use of power or something like that. He came up to my house and personally apologized. Put his house up for sale but took it off because it never sold. They're still there and the kid is still as freaked up today. At least crappy cop dad had some consequences, even if his little deviant didn't. A few years back I worked in the baby room of a daycare. We had this new baby start that was a late in life baby for her mom. Mom was 43 to 45 and this was her first kid. She was the absolute worst. She would show up to breastfeed her daughter and stay for 3 hours just watching how we interacted with the babies. Which wasn't too bad except she was running a constant commentary of what we could be doing better for these babies. Myself and all the other workers had been working with babies for years and this woman was telling us that all of our knowledge from our years of taking care of multiple babies was wrong and the things she read out of some new age baby book were correct. For the most part the first few months she was with us were alright. She was just annoying. But then her daughter started pulling up and trying to walk, as inevitably happens with all babies. One day she pulled up and fell and hit her head, getting a small knot on her forehead. As was procedure after making sure that the baby was alright I called her mom to let her know what had happened and that the baby was fine. She flipped her crap, she screamed unintelligibly and then hung up the phone. 10 minutes later she stormed through the door, snatched her baby up and went into the owner's office. I assumed that she was just gonna scream a bit and we would go on with our lives. Nope. Instead a few minutes later I'm called by into the office where this moron is demanding my job because if I had been watching her right she wouldn't have been hurt. How could I not have been watching her? Boss told her to shove it and the baby was back on Monday but still. A third grader was just relentlessly bullying this other girl. He was saying she was garbage and a monster and doing it loudly over and over so the whole class heard. Finally I'd had enough and told him I was going to call the office. He said to me, if you call the office I'm going to kill you. I call. They tell me to send him down and he says no. He says if I hear them call my name over the announcements I'm going to kill her too because she deserves it. And it'll be your fault. Well, they call his name over announcements when they realize he isn't going to be coming down. He destroys my classroom, and the principal eventually came up and dragged him out. He got suspended and mom calls the office demanding a beating with me. She said I wanna know what that art teacher did to provoke him to say that. She also demanded the music and gym teachers be there for some reason. Both principals and his classroom teacher. She didn't even show up to the meeting, but she still sent her son to school each day he was supposed to be suspended. Sometime in 2012, I distinctly remember it happening not long after Sandy Hook. A 4th grader I worked with was taking apart a highlighter at the sink and overflowing a cup. I asked him what his intention was and he said I'm going to poison a girl I don't like with highlighter juice. I asked why he would do that and he said I really hate her. I told my dunce of a superior about this and she said oh he's just being dramatic and blew me off. I told her if she did not escalate this I'm going over her head and she said fine. When his mom came to pick him up we explained what happened and she looked at him like oh my did you really do this, in a way like she's never heard him do anything close to this. This was not the first time we've had issues with this kid that involved telling his parents, but she just sounded so surprised this time. The next afternoon I could hear the kid from across the room telling his friends under his breath how he hated me for reporting this. The kid frickin' openly admitted he wanted to poison someone, and the cup in the sink was full of yellow water. For the rest of the week when he got picked up by mom she asked him how his day went and he gave her the puppy dog eye treatment as if plotting to injure someone didn't happen a few days earlier. She was so whipped. Parenting is awful these days, I swear. I'm no longer in the field. At my middle school while I was in 6th or 7th grade, 2 separate families threatened to sue my school for teaching us about the Islam faith. Keep in mind we were learning world history that year. I had a parent who would not stop bothering me to move her son up a reading level. I refused because he wasn't ready, so she threatened to kill herself if I didn't do it. My wife was an 8th grade reading teacher in rural Alabama and during a parent-teacher conference was asked why does he need to know how to read? He's going to be a farmer anyway. My boyfriend and I are both teachers in China. 1. The parent demanded that my boyfriend show him all of the assignments and assessments for their child since the beginning of the year. This was in June. I'm assuming they intended to argue the marks for every assignment, despite not being a teacher and knowing nothing about the work. Obviously, teachers do not keep stacks of assignments on their desk for every student and every class for the whole dang year. Because of this fact, the parent screamed at the principal and forced a beating so he could scream at my boyfriend. 2. I had a student in my level 2 ESL class who couldn't speak or understand a word of English. His assignments were all copied from somewhere, and on tests he would just copy directly from other areas and never answer correctly. I found out during midterm exams that he had told one of my other students that she had better give him the answers for the test so he could pass. This explains how he got to level 2 to begin with. I explained this to my leader, who arranged a meeting with his mother. I explained that a student told me this. She said he would never cheat. I said I have proof from another student, and several examples of copying. She said he only wants to pass so badly. I told her that's not a good reason to cheat. She didn't seem to see it as wrong. In the end, zero consequences for the kid and his mother seemed proud of him. WTF. It happens after childhood. 2. I'm a professor at a college in NH. I once had a parent track down my personal email address and proceed to send me multiple emails regarding her son's grade in a Comp 1 class arguing he is a brilliant writer. He was not, and he deserves an A. He did not. I explained that, aside from one writing exercise a few sentences long completed the first week, he didn't actually submit any work and hardly ever attended class. Unwavering and resolute, she argued. Well, that's precisely because he's such a talented writer and doesn't need such a useless class. I let her know I reached out to him regularly over the semester. However, students need to actually submit something, and, at this point in our email exchange, she's submitted more than 10 times the writing to me than her son had for what was meant to be a writing intensive class. I believe it was the next semester the student dropped out. I guess some writers, and their moms, are just too brilliant for writing. I used to work daycare in a pre-K room. Little boy baby talked, wasn't close to potty trained, had no social skills and threw temper tantrums where he would lay on the ground, kick, and fake cry. We called a conference with mom to talk about things because there was no way this poor guy was ready for kindergarten. Turns out mom baby talked to him, gave him whatever he wanted when he cried and wasn't even trying to potty train him because he's my last baby and I want him to stay a baby. I wonder what happened to that kid a lot. His mom was setting him up for failure. A friend of mine's younger brother had to go to speech therapy to learn proper English because his parents, her dad and his new wife, kept using baby talk with him and never thought to correct him. Poor kid is 10 and still says crap like, "Me loves you." A mom claimed that her son's skin was being negatively affected by the facility's soap. So, she brought his own organic soap for him to use. She also thought that he may have been allergic to multiple different things, and so we had to completely change our snacks to suit the kid. Months later, when asked about the allergies, she said, "Oh, I don't think he's allergic to lactose, gluten, dye, after all." Former teacher here. I used to teach a kid who was atrocious, never listened, argued, combative, regularly picked up by the police, troubled background and made life heck for pretty much everyone around him. He disadvantaged everyone he came in contact with in some way, and although aware of his impact he had no remorse or consciousness as to the dong he was being. He was extremely abusive to anyone with authority. Everyone from LSA to SLT knew what his future prospects were and we did everything possible to help him, yet parents gave no support. I taught him and was expected to get him to gain a grade of any degree when I knew full well he'd fail the exams and wouldn't keep exam conditions for those around him. Over an Easter break, I had a text from my LSA. The boy and a couple of his mates had stolen a car, been joyriding and then chased by the police. He lost control of the car, hitting a solid brick wall and killed himself and 2 others. It reached the local papers the next week. When we returned to school, everyone paid their respects, said how he was a troubled but wonderful kind-hearted kid with his whole life ahead of him. His parents came in saying they'd done everything they could, that their child could do no wrong and was a victim of the educational system. I couldn't show any emotion for him and spoke only with those who knew and taught him. The boy who was destroying his own chances and those around him. He may have needed support, but his actions to others were pure malice and hatred. His likely path would have been through gangs and crimes, and he was already breaking and entering, stealing cars, destroying other property and regularly mugging others. Preschool teacher here, but one that comes to mind is this one particular one. We told this mom for years her son needed to be seen by a doctor for his behavior, but she rug swept. and denied, and blamed. We went around in circles with her from the day he began at 2 years old until he went to kindergarten. Actually, we still do now, and he's in 1st grade and in our after school program. These are actual quotes that flew out of mom's mouth as soon as we told her son's behavior for that day. Well, he had 2 servings of fruit last night with dinner, when she was told he had an awful day, and could not keep his hands to himself nor listen to directions. This is my favorite excuse of all time. He had a play date on Saturday. Those always rile him up when told about similar behavior on a Tuesday. Well, he's been with his dad for 2 days now. This one dad did not mess around. This child listened to and respected dad much more than mom, because he disciplined him. He held him accountable. Mom's interpretation of his behavior was his dad's fault, not her son flying off the handle in her care because he knew he'd get away with it, unlike at dad's. Well, when he's with that child, his behavior gets worse. It doesn't. Similarly, well, what did that child, any child, do to him when told about altercations with other children? You see the point. Nothing was her son's fault. Nothing. And he knew that. When she told me he had been diagnosed with ADHD, I wasn't nearly as surprised as she thought I would be. He's now in our after school program, and our driver overheard his 1st grade teacher, oh thank God, when she saw that she, van driver, was there to pick him up. Even his school teacher can't handle him in class, I have heard from the grapevine. He also had a younger sister, who's been kicked out of another school, and was well on her way to being kicked out of ours when I left. For her behavior also. She's only 3. Examples include peeing on a teacher when she didn't get her way, hitting and kicking other staff, etc. She is her brother, except worse in some ways. I have more stories about more children. And this child, if there's interest. Oh God, when he's with Johnny he behaves badly is so common. It's not Johnny, mate, it's your child. Your child is the one writing on the walls and punching kids and ripping pages out of all the books. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.